Hi everyone, welcome to channel eTech. This is your host and technology instructor Arzan. In today's video, we'll be learning about user management. But before that, I would like to say something about our channel. This is our first official episode for our channel eTech. Channel eTech will be focusing on two types of videos, IT and soft skills. With IT, we will be learning system administration, networking, virtualization, and many more. So for today's video, let's go to Knowledge Lab and start exploring. So this is our Knowledge Lab. Well, if any trainers in our video says that we are going to Knowledge Lab, then he will come over here. This is a type of a studio where we'll be explaining concepts by using whiteboard and a lot of other tools and techniques. Well, today we are learning about user management. So let's first define what is a user account. A user account is a point of identification for any human which needs access for a system. It's very important for any type of system or device to understand that who is exactly logging into and using its services, because security is very important. Now, there are two basic characteristics for user account: authentication and personalization. Authentication, as I just said, is about security. Each and every individual employee of an organization has a user account. It is because for security and personalization. We don't want that any outsider or unauthorized user sits on the system and access critical data and resources of an organization. We want that only an authorized user or any authorized employee who has permissions can sit on the computer and access the resources. So authentication is very important. Now, as far as personalization is concerned, each and every individual user, as I said, has an account. Personalization states his own characteristics and configuration. A user individually has certain type of characteristics. A user might be a part of some type of department. So depending on his work profile, department, and a lot of other things, the permissions and configuration needs to be set. And that's why we call it personalization. The permissions or the configuration done for a user of sales department might not be same for the user who is in administration department, because both the work profiles are completely different, the requirements are completely different. Now if we talk about the contents, I believe that a user account majorly has three contents. The user credentials, that is username and password. Then we have permissions and the configuration part. If you talk about the types, there are basically two types of user accounts. Now it's not only two types, there are a lot of types of user accounts which we'll be learning ahead. But right now, to understand this concept, we will see only two types of user accounts, because this is the first type how we will segregate it. Local user account is created in a local machine and it is meant for local machine. Now what do you understand by that? Let's take a scenario. I have a friend called John. He has a computer, a desktop computer at his home, and it is used by his dad, it is used by John himself, and also sometimes his neighbor comes to access internet. So there are three different types of users who is using his system. In this situation, to categorize the data, to provide security, John has created user accounts in his computer. One for himself, one for his daddy, and one for the neighbors who comes to access the data. So that is a local user account because it is created in his desktop and meant for his desktop. He cannot use the same username password to access any resources in his college computer. Obviously not. But as far as domain user account is concerned, it is meant for network resources. It means by using a domain user account, a user can access any computer in the network or the domain and start his work. If he doesn't have a particular permission, then it will remain same in all other computers. The major difference in local user account and domain user account is that, as we learned, that a local user account is created and stored inside a local computer, whereas domain user account is created in a server with Active Directory, that is a domain controller, and it is meant for accessing network computers and network resources. So I give you an example of a local user account with John. Now let's consider that Annie has his has a user account, and she is an employee of a multinational company. Her work profile asks her to sit on various different computers and access different type of resources every day in day-to-day life. Now in this situation, she uses a domain user account, because it might happen that Monday to Tuesday she is accessing a computer on 7th floor, and then maybe due to the project work she is logging off and going to a computer on 11th floor in sales department and start accessing the resources. But it is permissible because in this case the user account will be stored on the server and it is centrally located. That's why she has a mobility. Now we will not confuse user account and user profiles. That is the last part of the video. I will exactly explain you how user accounts and user profiles are completely different. Attributes means properties or traits. Everything around us has properties. If you take an example of this laptop, then it also has properties. Diary, table, chair, AC, lights, fan, everything has properties. Now, as far as Active Directory is concerned, a user account is an object. Active Directory considers user account, computer accounts, organizational units, printers, shared resources, and a lot of entities like an object. And every object has certain properties. To understand this better, I have something for you. Let's take an example of this diary. So, we will learn about the properties of this object, and we will write down the properties of this book onto this chart. I have this chart where I have mentioned that book is the object, and I have mentioned 4 attributes or 4 properties, say length, number of pages, color, subject, which every book has. So let's see what attributes we need to jot in for this book. The first is length. So let me just measure what's the length of this book. It's 17 centimeters. Now the number of pages. Number of pages is 80. Color, as we all can see, it's brown. Subject, well, let me check. Okay, it's a telephone directory. So we learned that there are certain characteristics or properties which are common. Like you can say the title is common, like every book has some or the other length, every book has some number of pages, a color and a subject. Now in the same way, we will be learning about user account. Even user account will be having a lot of attributes, but I have given an example with 4 properties. So let's check that. It's here. Over here, user is the object, and there are certain attributes which are mentioned about the user, like SAM account name. Technically it is known as login name. We will understand that in a meanwhile. Second is log on to. Then we have account expires. This user is not going to log in any day after 15th March 2013. And the next is log on hours. It means the user can access systems holding this user account only between Monday to Friday and between 8 a.m. to 4 a.m. Now we'll understand technically what are the types of attributes with the user account. There are 2 types of user attributes: name attributes and account attributes. Name attributes are meant for identification purpose, and account attributes are meant for configuration part. Now there are only 4 standard name attributes which I have mentioned over here: the SAM account name, user principal name, RDN or relative distinguished name, and the display name. SAM account name means the user login name or the user login ID. Now as we know that user credentials comprises of username and password. So if any user wants to log in, say John Smith wants to log in, He might have a SAM account name or user ID like john.smith. So that becomes the SAM account name. In my case, my full name is Arzan Amaria. So the SAM account name might be Arzan.a. The next is user principal name. User principal name has two values combined with each other. One is the SAM account name and the DNS domain name. And both the IDs are separated by a symbol, that is @. So let's take an example. This is the same user ID, arzan.a, and this user account belongs to domain known as etech. So if the name of the domain is etech, then the user principal name would be arzan.a at etech.com. Now in most of the organizations, this value becomes the email ID of the particular user. The next is RDN, or relative distinguished name. Relative distinguished name is one of the types of naming conventions which are used to identify a user account. There are lots of types. There are LDAP, then there is DN, distinguished name, then there is canonical name, a lot of type of names, and RDN is one of them. But RDN being friendly, we always use it in the name attributes. The last one is display name. Now this is very important. The SAM account name is arzan.a. If I'm working in an organization, I have logged into my computer, and if I'm not on my desk, if somebody comes around, tries to visit with the computer and finds out that, oh, arzan.a is already logged in. But arzan.a is my SAM account name, it's my ID. Another user or any other person from the company will not be able to recognize me by using that SAM account name. Due to which, user account also has display name associated with that. Display name might comprise of a full name, first name, comma, last name, or any type of pattern it can be followed. Over here, I am using last name first. So it can become my last name and then my first name. So this was about the name attributes. Now if we go to account attributes, then as I told you, it's related to configuration. We will see all these properties and a lot more properties on server interface directly when I will be showing you how to configure user accounts. User accounts are created and stored in Active Directory if we are talking about domain user accounts. Domain user accounts are generally used in the corporate environments, so we will always learn about that. Now, how can we create user accounts? There are various tools by which we can create user accounts, like Active Directory, User on Computers, Windows PowerShell, CSVDE, LEFDE, and there are certain third-party tools as well, like Cat2. Exactly how to create a user account is what we will be seeing in our practical video. I will show you, or rather demonstrate, how to create a user account by using our simple and old Active Directory User on Computers. Now, as far as the administrative purpose is concerned, there are many different purposes due to which the user account is created. So right now I will be demonstrating certain issues, or you can say certain areas where administration of user account is done. So just follow me. So let's take the first scenario about logon hours. We have a secured banking network. In this network, we have a user called John. John works with accounts department, and accounts department has a fixed work timings from 9 to 6. Now, the bank policy says that a user should not be able to log in before or after his designated to work timings. It means if John tries to log in at 7 o'clock, he should not be given any access. It means that John or any other user from accounts department, if tries to log in before 9 in the morning or after 6 in the evening, no user will be allowed or given any access. Now next we will see log on to. We have a secure banking network and Jack is an employee working for the network. Now Jack is a contract-based user in this case. The company policy says that a contract-based user should only work on designated computers in the network. It means we are going to give a designated computer to Jack. So we have a computer called COM23 and we associate Jack with COM23. So Jack will be able to use only COM23 and no other computers in the network. So once we apply this policy or configuration on Jack's user account, and if he tries to access to any other computers in the network, then his access will be restricted. Now we have restriction to removable media. Many companies follow this policy for data protection. Let's take an example. We have a software firm network and Smith works as an employee in the same company. Now Smith belongs to sales department. Now there is a company policy. It says that no user should be able to use any removable media like CD, DVD or pen drive from sales department. Now because Smith belongs to sales department, that's why as an administrator we'll make sure that Smith is not able to access any of these devices. So if Smith tries to access any computer and if he tries to use a pen drive or a CD, then the configuration of the policy will restrict him to do so. Now we will see roaming profiles. Let's take an example. We have a user called Jack and he works in a network where there are few computers. So let's take his computer number 1, computer number 2 and computer number 3. Jack logs in to computer number 3 on Monday and sets his user environment, like he creates some files and folders on that computer. He sets his wife's photo as desktop wallpaper and he also creates few application shortcuts on desktop. On Tuesday, his computer number 3 fails, due to which he switches on to computer number 2. But because of roaming profiles, we applied a policy that every user should have a customized user environment irrespective of any system logged in the network. So even on computer number 2, Jack will find the same files and folders, the same desktop wallpaper and the same shortcuts which he created on COM3 because the roaming profiles are stored centrally on the server. User management policies. User management policies is one more important aspect related to the user management. Now there are different type of user management policies like account policies, password policies and rights management policies and many more. Over here, first of all, we'll be understanding the account policies. Now, account policies determines the behavior of a user account, how exactly it will behave in the network as per the user intervention. So, under account policies, the first policy what we have is account lockout threshold. The value which we set or configure in this policy determines the number of attempts a user can get to log into his system. Sometimes users forget passwords, so they try to guess another password or an old password to check whether it is correct or not. So what number of attempts can be given to a user before the account gets locked is what determines by this policy. The by default number of attempts which is set in the domain controller is 3 times or 3 attempts. But as an administrator, if I want to increase the number of attempts or decrease the number of attempts, it can be done very easily. Now the range is between 1 to 999 attempts. It means we can set any number between 1 to 999 attempts and it will be followed accordingly in the network. Let's take an example. John went out of the office 15 days back because there was some personal emergency, and he came back after a long time. He sits on his desk and tries to log into the system, and when he types Ctrl-Alt-Delete, at that point of time, he tries and enter his password. And then he realizes that he has forgotten his password. He tries and enters certain type of combinations, but after 3 attempts, he gets an error. Bomb. User account is locked. Please contact your administrator. And then he has to send a mail to his boss, and his boss sends the mail to administrator, and it goes on. Now why this happened? Why can't we give unlimited number of attempts? Well, as far as the security point of view is concerned, there is a type of an attack. It's known as social engineering attack. It can be done by one of the colleagues or a person who is near you, who knows you very well. Now we know that password is something which is unique and confidential for each and every user. So most of the people, or most of the user has a tendency to give a password based on a girlfriend's name or cell phone number or something related to his favorite dish or surroundings or anything. And if somebody works with a person for a very long time, then that person tends to know everything about his colleague. In this situation, that person, if wants to access his user account or access his colleague's user account, then he can start thinking, okay, let me make a list of all the things which I know about this person, and then he can combine all the values and try to explore the password. To stop such type of activities, we have account lockout threshold. Now, let's go to the next part. The next policy says account lockout duration. Account lockout duration states the time period after which the account again gets reset to the normal mode from locked mode. Let's get back to the same example. As I told you, that John tries some attempts and his accounts get locked. But if his accounts get locked at 12 o'clock, then from 12 o'clock till what time of period his account will remain locked is what is determined by this particular policy. The by default duration over here is 30 minutes, which is set in the server. So if account gets locked at 12 o'clock, then till 12:30 it will remain locked. And after that, the account will come back out of the lockout mode in the normal mode. Now, how it is useful for a user? Say for example at 12 o'clock, as we know that John failed to log into the system, and he's just sitting down and thinking that, how can I re-log in? So if you don't want to contact your administrator, then he can wait for 30 minutes, and after that he again has the same number of attempts which are set over here. So now he can again use his 3 to 4 attempts to guess his password. Now next is reset account lockout counter. This policy determines the duration. Duration for what? Duration for this account lockout region. It means, as we know that over here, if there are certain number of attempts what we get, then after what time period the number of attempts counter will go back to 0. Now I think I have to show you an example for this. Let's say we have John over here. John has 3 attempts, and as he uses his attempts, the counter begins. First attempt, second attempt, third attempt, and that's it. Now he will get an error. But this time duration actually shows that after what time period this countdown will again get back to 0. So if we have set 30 minutes over here, which is the default time limit, then after 30 minutes the reset account lockout counter will be resetted to 0. So now after 30 minutes, when John accesses the system, he again has fresh 3 attempts to log into the system and to guess his password. Another type or another set of user management policies would be password policies. Password policies determine the behavior of password or how passwords are managed in the network. I have mentioned few policies on the board here. The first one is maximum password age. Now, whenever a user sets his own password, then his maximum and minimum age of password determines by this policy. Maximum password age means the value in terms of number of days that a user can use the same password. So, if John has given a password today, say XYZ123 asterisk, if this is the password which John has given today, then he can use the same password to log into his user account for next 42 days if it is a default value. But as I said, if we are an administrator, then we can change this value at any point of time. So maximum password age is that value until which a user can use the same password to log into the system. Second is minimum password age. Now minimum password age is exactly opposite to the maximum password age. In minimum password age, whatever value is set, a user has to use a single password in that particular time period. So the by default value over here which is set in the server is 1 day or 24 hours. It means if John changes his password today at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, then he has to use the same password at least till next day 1 o'clock or 24 hours if it is by default, or we can change our value at any point of time. So that is minimum password age. Then we have minimum characters of password. Minimum characters of password determines the minimum number of characters which needs to be used in a password. That is, we know one thing, that if the length of the password is more, if there are more characters in the password, then it is considered to be a strong password. So all the companies generally consider 7 character to 12 character password as a strong password. So by default policy inside the server is 7 characters. Now, password meets complexity requirements. Now over here, the scope of selection is only 2. It can be enabled or disabled. By default it is enabled. Now what is the meaning of password meets complexity requirements? Now it determines how a user can make his password. Okay, if we say that the password should meet complexity requirements, it means that password should be complex enough so that nobody can be able to guess it. So the by default policy says that a password should have alphabets, numbers and a special character. A combination of all these 3 types of characters forms a complex and a strong password. And password meets complexity requirements is enabled by default, so users have to create a password which has all 3 types of characters. If we disable this configuration, then user can make any password by using only numbers or only letters or only characters as he likes. And the last one is enforce password history. Now we know that after every few days or after some interval, users tends to change password. Networks also need the same thing, and that's why we have maximum password age, because we don't want a user in the network to use the same password for a very long time, because it might happen that somebody can come to know about his password and that person might misuse it. So for security point, we always want a user to change his password. So if he is in the network since long time, then he must have used different set of passwords since a very long time. And all the old passwords which that user has ever used are listed and stored inside the server. But what number of passwords we want the server to keep a track of is what is determined by this policy, that is enforce password history. Whatever value we put over here, by default is 24 passwords. So if there are 24 passwords in enforce password history, then server will remember 24 last passwords which are used by a user and the server will not allow to use any of those passwords to be changed again until it is used for 24 times, until 24 new passwords have come into the picture. So that is about password policies. So guys, that's all for today. In next video, I will take you to server interface where we will be learning more tools and techniques related to practical implementation. I'm getting late for lunch, so stay tuned on channel eTech. Keep watching.